Hello, welcome back to the channel. We've got another Space Marine review for you today. This time it's going to be the Vindicator Laser Destroyer, which is one of the Forgeworld models from the Imperial Armor Compendium book, which will be available for Space Marine players. So let's dive straight into the actual datasheet for this tank. So it's a heavy support option, it's coming in at 10 power level or 175 points before any upgrades are taken. As for its stat line, it's got a movement of 10 inches, weapon skill 6+, ballistic skill 3+, strength 6, toughness 8, wounds 11, attacks 3, leadership 8 and a 3+ save. Now of course it will have a degrading stat line, so the movement, the ballistic skill and the attacks will degrade as the model gets damaged, so it's only really the movement and the ballistic skill that are important here because it's not going to be doing much in engagement range. Now as for the actual weapons that the Vindicator Laser Destroyer comes equipped with is the following. So it's got a laser volley cannon and a storm bolter. So let's check those ones out. So the laser volley cannon, it's got two different profiles. You select which profile when you're selecting your targets. So both of them are 36-inch range and both of them are heavy 3. The volley fire is strength 9, minus 3 AP and the damage is D3 plus 3. Whereas the overcharge fire, same range, 3 shots, is strength 10, minus 4 AP and the damage is a flat 6. And any unmodified hit rolls over 1 made with this weapon will cause a mortal wound if you didn't remain stationary. So if you do move and fire this, any ones will cause a mortal wound to this tank. For me personally, I always think you should be using the overcharge fire, partly because of the strength 10, it's got a little bit of extra AP, but that damage being a flat 6, whereas the volley fire has an average damage output of 5. You could roll badly and then it could only be 4 damage. You could roll well and it'd be a 6, but I'd rather just do the actual overcharge fire as it's only single mortal wounds there. It's also got a storm bolter, 24-inch range, rapid fire 2, strength 4, no AP, 1 damage. It's just a little light infantry weapon, don't expect too much from it. Maybe it'll peel off a guardian or so, but it's not really why you brought this Vindicator. Now as for the war gear options, there's only one here, which is a Hunt Killer Missile for 5 points, 48-inch range, heavy 1, strength 10, minus 2 AP, damage D6, 1 use only. You fire it in turn 1 to get this to minus 3 AP in the Devastator Doctrine, but it pairs quite nicely because it's another strength 10 weapon. Now as for the abilities, it's not got many abilities either. It's only got Angels of Death, and out of the Angels of Death ability, it's only really the combat doctrines that are going to have any input. All the other ones don't really do much for a tank, but the combat doctrines will add AP depending on which combat doctrine you've got associated with that battle round. It's also got the Explode ability, as it's a vehicle. If it's destroyed on a roll of a 6, units within 6 inches, including your own, will suffer D3 mortal wounds. Quite standard there. But it's worth noting that there's no martial legacy ability, so it doesn't cost you an additional CP just to field this. Then finally for the faction keywords, it's got the chapter keyword of course, so it goes into any chapter. It's a vehicle and it's got the smokescreen keyword, which will relate to a stratagem. But before we get onto the stratagems, I just wanted to kind of compare what the Vindicator Laser Destroyer is like versus the Classic Vindicator model. Now the Laser Destroyer is 45 points more expensive. It's got the exact same stat line as the Classic Vindicator, but what you're paying for with those 45 additional points is the fact that you're going to get a damage 6 weapon or a damage D3 plus 3 weapon. Whereas with the standard Vindicator with the Demolisher Cannon, it's only 24-inch range. Yes, it is strength 10, but the damage is D6, so you're averagely going to get 3 or 4 there. So a very unreliable damage, and it's got the blast keyword as well, which isn't always the best thing. It is sometimes a hindrance. If you get tagged in engagement range by enemy models, you can't be firing the big weapon into combat. But with the Vindicator Laser Destroyer, you can be, simply because there's no blast ability associated with those weapons. Let's get back on track. Looking at the stratagems, you've only got 2 here. You've got Smokescreen Stratagem for 1 command point, for a -1 to hit if your enemy is targeting this tank, and the Armor of Contempt for a 5+ feel no pain save against mortal wounds. Probably not going to be needed. It's more for things like smite and whatnot, but this thing's got a decent range, so it's not going to get too close. Now in terms of synergy with other units within the Codex, you've got Tech Marines with the Blessing of the Omnisaur ability, so they can be healing your tank D3 lost wounds every turn, and they can also be adding 1 to the range attack hit rolls, again within 3 inches with Awaken the Machine Spirits. Now you can further boost this with the Tech Marine by turning him into a Master of the Forge, so when you're using the Blessing of the Omnisaur ability, it won't be D3 lost wounds recovered, it will be a flat 3. If you wanted to get an invuln save, you bring a Librarian with a Psychic Fortress, with a warp charge value of a 6, you can be putting a 5+ invuln save on any units that are within 6 inches of the Psyker. Now in terms of synergy with some chapters, there's a few that I wanted to discuss here. First of all, the Black Templars. One of their vows is pretty good in particular, which is Uphold the Honour of the Emperor, which will give all units within that chapter a 5+ invulnerable save, and they can't be wounded on less than a 3+, which I think is really strong, having an invuln save and a toughness 8 model. It's definitely something I want to be doing. And also with the chapter tactics, you can ignore mortal wounds on a 5+. Very similar to the armor of contempt stratagem, except it is inbuilt within the chapter. You can also look at Dark Angels. If they're using the Grim Resolve ability, if they stay stationary, it's going to be a +1 to hit. So they'll be firing the big gun, needing 2s to hit, which is going to be pretty decent. You're always likely going to be hitting there, and if you do miss, there's always the command reroll if you need to. You've then got Iron Hands with the flesh is weak. So they're going to have a 6+ feel no pain save. And also in terms of damage characteristics, they're going to be considered double. So it's going to be really hard to bracket this thing. It means it's very likely it's going to be firing at its best profile, ballistic skill value of a 3+ and moving 10 inches. And the last one I wanted to mention here is the Ultramarine, simply because they can fall back and shoot. Now, vehicles can fire into combat, but if you did want to select your target as opposed to firing at a min unit of, say, Termagants that have tagged your tank, you can simply fall back with Codex Discipline, which is the Ultramarine's chapter tactic, although it will be at a -1 to hit penalty. So let's get on with the summary for the Vindicator Laser Destroyer. Starting with the good, it's got toughness 8, which is obviously very solid, very tanky. It's got a 36-inch range laser volley cannon, so when you're comparing that to the Classic Vindicator, you don't need to get too close to it, which has always been the flaw for the Classic Vindicator. 24-inch range isn't good enough in my opinion. It's got strength 10 -4 AP and a flat 6 damage if you take that selected profile, which is going to do absolute bits, especially with 3 shots. You're almost guaranteed to be getting at least 1 to go through there. It's going to be firing into combat because it's got no blast hindrance within its weapons. Again, when you're comparing it to the Classic Vindicator, once that thing gets tagged in combat, it can't be firing the Demolisher Cannon, which is again one of its flaws because it needs to get close to fire in the first place. It's got a more reliable amount of shots, not D6. I've always preferred to have 3 shots as opposed to D6. Now it is slightly less than the average of 3.5, but at least you know where you stand. If you do overcharge with a roll of a 1, it's only 1 mortal wound, you're not going to lose the entire model. And you've got the Smokescreen Stratagem as an option if you wanted to give it a little bit more resiliency. And finally, there's no Martial Legacy ability, which is normally associated with Forgeworld models, but thankfully this one doesn't have it. Now as for the bad, there's no invuln save. Now it wouldn't be too common to have an invuln save on these kind of models, but you still got to mark it down. It doesn't have a 2+ armor save either. Things that have got toughness 8, you would kind of expect to have a 2+ armor save alongside it, but I suppose that has been saved for the Land Raiders. It's got degrading stats because it's got more than 10 wounds, which means once it does get degraded, it does become less effective as the game goes on. In terms of an engagement range, once it does get caught in melee, it's not going to be doing much. With a weapon skill value of a 6+ and only 3 attacks, at strength 6. It's not core of course, so buffing it is going to be a little bit difficult, and the Classic Vindicator is just cheaper, so sometimes if you want to save points and you still want that strength 10 weapon, you just go for the Classic Vindicator there. And then finally there's other options that just offer more. For example, the Relic Contemptor Dreadnought. That's got loads of high strength weapons, and it's also decent in combat as well with the Dreadnought Combat Weapon or the Dreadnought Chain Fist. So that's the summary out the way, let's get on with the rating. So for the Vindicator Laser Destroyer, I think it's a decent option, but there are definitely better options that you can select from. So for me, this is going to be a 3-star rating. So guys, that's the rating today. Do you agree with the rating? Let me know below. Also remember, from the 1st of December, we're doing our countdown to Christmas every single day up to Christmas Day, where we're going to be comparing a Space Marine unit to a very similar unit within the Necron Codex. It's not going to be too competitive, it's a little bit of fun, something to keep us moving in the holiday season. So guys, that's the end of the video today. Like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.